Football is a game built on a beautiful foundation of rules, fair play, and sportsmanship. We like to believe that when 22 men step onto the green grass, the victory will go to the side with the better tactics, the higher physical conditioning, and the superior natural talent. But if you dig beneath the polished surface of modern tournaments, you quickly uncover a darker, far more sinister truth. Football is also a landscape of immense desperation. When hundreds of millions of dollars are on the line, when the pride of entire nations rests on a single 90-minute match, and when an individual player's career can be made or destroyed by one single result, the temptation to break the rules becomes completely overwhelming. Some players do not just bend the rules, they completely smash them. They engage in calculated, deliberate deception, risking their reputations, their careers, and their place in sports history just to gain a hidden advantage over their opponents. We are talking about elaborate schemes, systematic fraud, faked injuries, hidden blades, and underground betting rings that have completely altered the outcome of legendary tournaments. These are the moments where the competitive spirit was completely thrown out the window, replaced by pure, unadulterated corruption. Today, we are opening up the darkest cabinets in football history to examine 10 legendary players and football figures who were caught red-handed trying to cheat the system. Before we unravel these unbelievable stories of sports deception, I want to welcome you back to the Football Archive. If you love deep, uncompromised dives into the hidden scandals, historical turning points, and controversies that shape the global game, hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment below telling me the most scandalous act of cheating you have ever witnessed on a football pitch, and let me know which country you are watching this video from. Let us get a massive conversation going down in the comments section, because today's topic is going to spark serious debate. To truly understand the length to which some athletes will go to secure a victory, you have to look past the modern era of the video assistant referee. Today, the pitch is surrounded by dozens of high-definition cameras, tracking every micro-movement, making it incredibly difficult to get away with blatant fraud. But right before the technological revolution, football was a wild landscape where a player with enough audacity could manipulate an entire stadium, fool the match officials, and create a completely fictional reality on the pitch. The consequences of these actions were not just yellow cards or short-term suspensions. They triggered global political incidents, destroyed the financial stability of elite clubs, and led to lifetime bans from the sport. From the iconic stadiums of South America to the high-stakes pressure cookers of the English Premier League, the history of football is stained with moments where the desire to win completely eclipsed the moral code of the game. Get ready, because our very first story takes us back to the hot, volatile atmosphere of the Maracana Stadium in 1989, where a world-class goalkeeper staged a bloody, terrifying farce that shocked the entire planet and permanently altered the destiny of South American football history. September 1989. The Maracana Stadium in Rio de Janeiro was transforming into a literal pressure cooker. Brazil and Chile were locked in a brutal, high-stakes World Cup qualifier. Brazil only needed a draw to book their ticket to the 1990 World Cup in Italy, while Chile absolutely had to win. The match was fierce, physical, and dripping with intense geopolitical rivalry. By the second half, Brazil had managed to secure a 1-0 lead thanks to a goal from Careca. The Chilean players were growing increasingly desperate as the clock ticked away, watching their World Cup dreams slip through their fingers. Then, in the 67th minute, chaos erupted, and the entire world watched in absolute horror. A corporate flare, thrown from the intense Brazilian crowd, came soaring through the smoky air and landed in the Chilean penalty box, right next to the world-class Chilean goalkeeper and captain, Roberto Rojas. Through the thick smoke, the cameras caught Rojas collapsing heavily to ground, clutching his face in apparent agony. When his teammates rushed over to check on him, the scene was completely terrifying. Roberto Rojas's face was completely covered in dark red blood. The Chilean players, furious and screaming about stadium safety, refused to continue the match under such hostile conditions. They carried their bleeding captain off the pitch, retreated to the locker room, and demanded that FIFA award Chile the victory due to the dangerous environment created by the Brazilian fans. It looked like a catastrophic tragedy that would disqualify Brazil and cause a massive international sporting scandal. But as the dust settled in Rio de Janeiro, FIFA officials and investigators began to look very closely at the television footage and high-definition photographs taken by sports journalists behind the goal line. Something did not add up. The trajectory of the flare showed that it had landed a few feet away from Rojas, never actually making direct physical contact with his body. Furthermore, the burns on his skin did not match the chemical impact of stadium flare. It looked like a deep, clean cut. Under intense pressure and facing forensic evidence, the terrifying truth was finally uncovered. Roberto Rojas had not been struck by a flare at all. He had perpetrated one of the most calculated, dangerous acts of cheating in the entire history of global sports. Before the match had even started, Rojas had hidden a razor blade inside his goalkeeper glove, wrapping it carefully around his fingers. The plan, masterminded alongside the Chilean coach Orlando Aravena and the team doctor, was simple yet sinister. If Chile was losing late in the game, Rojas would wait for the crowd to throw an object, collapse to the ground, use the hidden razor blade to cut his own forehead open, and blame the Brazilian fans to force a walkover victory. It was a complete psychological and physical operation designed to manipulate the entire International Football Federation. The backlash from FIFA was swift, brutal, and completely historic. Roberto Rojas was hit with a lifetime ban from professional football, completely destroying his career as one of South America's greatest goalkeepers. The Chilean national team was immediately disqualified from a 1990 World Cup and completely banned from participating in the 1994 World Cup qualifiers as well. The president of the Chilean Football Federation, the coach, and the team doctor were all hit with severe, multi-year bans for their direct complicity in the plot. The faked injury of Roberto Rojas remains a chilling reminder of the absolute madness that can take over an athlete's mind when the pressure of a nation becomes too heavy to bear. It proved that some players are willing to literally bleed for a victory, even if that blood is shed by their own hands in a desperate act of fraud. And while Rojas used physical violence against himself to cheat the system, our next entry features a player who used the complete opposite strategy, a man who managed to cheat the entire football world for over 2 decades without ever kicking a football, the ultimate phantom of the pitch. While some players spent hours on the training pitch sweating blood to hone their skills, one man managed to build a 20-year career across elite clubs in Brazil, Europe, and South America without ever playing a full 90-minute match. His name was Carlos Enrique Raposo, better known to the world as Carlos Kaiser. He is, without a shadow of a doubt, the greatest con artist the sport of football has ever seen. His cheating was not a localized event or quick tactical dive. It was a masterful, decade-long psychological operation that completely fooled club presidents, legendary managers, and massive fan bases into believing he was a deadly, prolific striker. Kaiser possessed everything a top-tier footballer needed, except for the actual ability to play football. He had the physical build of an elite athlete, incredible charisma, and an unmatched talent for networking. In the 1980s and 1990s, long before the internet, digital scouting networks and video compilations allowed clubs to instantly verify a player's statistics. Kaiser relied entirely on the power of illusion. He befriended the biggest Brazilian football icons of the era, legends like Renato Gaucho, Bebeto, and Zico. These superstars genuinely liked Kaiser because he was funny, loyal, and could organize incredible social gatherings. In return, these legends would recommend Kaiser to their club directors as a highly talented young forward looking for a contract. Kaiser would arrive at a new club, sign a short-term, low-risk contract, and immediately implement his ultimate survival strategy. During his very first training session, he would run after the ball, suddenly clutch his hamstring in apparent agony, and collapse to the ground screaming. In an era with basic medical imaging and no MRI machines, doctors had to take the player's word at face value. Kaiser would spend the next 6 months in the medical room, collecting his salary, enjoying the club's facilities, and building relationships with the local sports journalists. He would pay young academy players to intentionally foul him during practice sessions just to give himself a credible excuse to stay on the injured list. To maintain his high-profile reputation, he would walk around the club facilities carrying a massive, expensive mobile phone, which was an absolute luxury at the time. He would speak in fake English, pretending to turn down massive transfer offers from wealthy clubs in Europe just to make his current team believe they possessed a highly coveted asset. His most legendary escape happened while he was under contract with Bangu, a highly volatile club owned by a dangerous, powerful figure in Rio de Janeiro. The team was losing 2-0, and the owner, Furious Ly, ordered the manager to put Kaiser on the pitch to save the game. Kaiser was in absolute panic. If he stepped onto the grass, his complete lack of football skills would be exposed instantly to thousands of fans. As he was warming up near the touchline, he noticed a group of opposing fans shouting insults at his team supporters. Seizing the moment, Kaiser sprinted over to the fence, climbed into the stands, and started a massive physical brawl with the fans. The referee immediately showed him a straight red card before he had even entered the field of play. Later in the dressing room, the club owner rushed in screaming for an explanation. Kaiser, using his masterclass manipulation, looked the dangerous owner in the eyes and said that God had given him the owner as a second father, and he simply could not stand by while opposing fans insulted his father's honor. The owner was so deeply moved by this display of loyalty that he immediately handed Kaiser a contract extension on the spot. Carlos Kaiser successfully cheated the entire global football industrial complex by recognizing that a football club is often governed by perception rather than reality, cementing his status as the absolute phantom icon of sports deception. If you think cheating in football is limited to rogue individual players acting out of sheer desperation, you are about to see how deep the rabbit hole truly goes. In the summer of 2006, just as the Italian national team was preparing to conquer the world at the tournament in Germany, a massive bomb exploded beneath the foundation of Serie A. It was called Calciopoli, and it remains the most sophisticated, widespread, and institutionalized system of sporting deception ever uncovered in modern sports history. This was not a story of a player diving for a penalty or a goalkeeper hiding a blade. This was a calculated underworld conspiracy orchestrated by the most powerful club executives in Italy to completely rig the championship by manipulating the selection of referees. At the absolute epicenter of this dark spiderweb stood a man named Luciano Maggi, the highly influential and terrifyingly clever general manager of Juventus. For years, Maggi operated like a mafia don within the Italian Football Federation. Italian police investigators, executing wiretaps on thousands of telephone calls, uncovered a shocking reality. Maggi was routinely calling the head of the Italian Referee Commission to demand exactly which referees were assigned to Juventus matches, selecting officials who were known to be highly favorable to his club. But the deception went even deeper. Maggi didn't just ensure that Juventus received favorable calls, he actively engineered the destruction of their direct championship rivals. During these wiretap conversations, Maggi would instruct the referee selectors to assign incredibly strict, aggressive referees to matches involving teams like AC Milan, Inter Milan, Roma, and Fiorentina. The goal was sinister and highly effective. These strict referees would intentionally hand out yellow cards to the star players of rival teams right before those teams were scheduled to play against Juventus, causing those star players to be suspended for the crucial head-to-head matchups. Maggi also used his immense media influence to run smear campaigns against any honest referee who dared to make a correct call against Juventus, effectively destroying their careers and forcing the entire refereeing community into absolute submission. If a referee did not cooperate with the Maggi system, they were cast out into the wilderness. The wiretaps revealed a chilling recording of Maggi locking an international referee named Gianluca Paparesta inside a stadium locker room after a match because he was furious that the official hadn't favored Juventus enough. When the full transcript of the police investigation was leaked to the public, the entire nation of Italy went into absolute shock. The beautiful game had been turned into a completely scripted theater performance controlled by a single boardroom master. The sporting justice system acted with absolute fury. Juventus, the historic giants of Italian football, were stripped of their 2005 and 2006 Serie A championship titles and suffered a historic relegation to the second division, Serie B, for the first time in their entire history. They were also hit with a massive points deduction that crippled their next season. Other major clubs involved in the network, including AC Milan, Fiorentina, Lazio, and Reggina, were hit with devastating points deductions and banned from competing in wealthy European competitions. Luciano Maggi himself was hit with a lifetime ban from any involvement in professional football. Calciopoli proved that when the stakes reach the absolute pinnacle of European society, cheating ceases to be a minor tactical infraction and transforms into a systemic criminal enterprise that can steal the soul of an entire football nation. And while this corporate conspiracy used telephone lines and hidden influence to rig matches from above, our next entry brings us back to the modern day, looking at how the rise of digital money has created a brand new wave of tech-savvy cheaters operating directly on the pitch. In the modern landscape of football, a brand new and terrifying weapon of deception has taken over the sport. It does not look like the old conspiracies of powerful club presidents meeting in dark boardrooms, nor does it look like a goalkeeper hiding a razor blade in his glove. Today, the greatest threat to the integrity of the beautiful game is an invisible, digital network that operates directly from the smartphones in our pockets. The explosion of global online sports betting has opened up a dangerous floodgate, leading to a massive wave of match-fixing scandals that have caught modern players red-handed in acts of absolute sabotage. This is the dark world of spot fixing, a highly sophisticated form of cheating where an individual player does not necessarily try to lose the entire match. Instead, they sell highly specific micro-events on the pitch to underground criminal syndicates in exchange for massive payouts. We are talking about a player deliberately getting a yellow card in a specific minute, a defender intentionally giving away a corner kick during a precise window of the first half, or a goalkeeper purposely allowing a specific number of goals to be scored late in the game. These micro-events are almost impossible for fans or managers to detect live because they look like standard mistakes or typical moments of aggression. But behind the scenes, international betting syndicates place millions of dollars on these exact outcomes across unregulated digital platforms, turning the competitive theater of football into a highly lucrative, entirely rigged casino. Over the last few years, major investigations spanning from the elite leagues of Western Europe to the highly volatile state championships of Brazil have uncovered a shocking network of complicit athletes. Elite players with multi-million-dollar contracts, young prospects looking for a quick financial breakthrough, and veteran athletes playing in lower divisions have all been caught in the net of these digital syndicates. Investigators operating with digital forensic tools have intercepted thousands of encrypted chat messages on applications like WhatsApp and Telegram, exposing the direct, cold-blooded negotiations between professional footballers and criminal fixers. The messages are completely chilling. You see professional athletes negotiating the precise price tag of a yellow card, sending photos of their official starting lineups to criminals hours before kickoff, and complaining about how hard it was to provoke the referee into booking them during the game. The psychological devastation of this cheating is absolute. When a player participates in spot fixing, they are not just betraying their opponent, they are actively betraying their own teammates, their manager, and the thousands of loyal supporters who spend their hard-earned money to watch a clean, honest competition. The response from global sporting authorities and federal police forces has been an absolute war of attrition. Dozens of professional players have been hit with massive multi-year suspensions, massive financial penalties, and direct criminal indictments that carry real prison time. The digital betting pandemic has forced football to face a terrifying crisis of faith. It has created a world where every single unusual mistake, every single unnecessary slide tackle, and every single bizarre red card is instantly viewed by fans through a lens of deep suspicion. The beautiful game is locked in a desperate battle against an algorithmic ghost, proving that when the financial incentives of the digital gambling market collide with the moral vulnerabilities of individual athletes, the very soul of sports competition can be purchased for a digital transaction. And as we look back at the history of modern sporting fraud, we realize that this intersection of medical science, personal desperation, and global pressure once led to the downfall of the greatest icon the sport has ever seen, a tragic event that shook the entire planet. June 1994. The eyes of the entire world were locked on the United States as the country hosted the World Cup for the very first time in history. The tournament was a massive, star-studded spectacle, but the biggest narrative surrounding the entire event was the dramatic redemption arc of the most polarizing icon the sport had ever seen, Diego Armando Maradona. After a chaotic few years marked by drug suspensions, weight struggles, and continuous run-ins with the law, the Argentine legend had undergone a brutal physical transformation. He arrived in America looking incredibly lean, hyper-focused, and completely energized, leading a phenomenal Argentina squad that looked fully capable of conquering the world once again. In their opening match against Greece, Maradona scored an absolute masterpiece of a goal, sprinting toward a television camera and screaming into the lens with an expression of pure, unadulterated madness in his eyes. It looked like the ultimate cinematic comeback. But just a few days later, right after Argentina secured a crucial 2-1 victory over Nigeria in Boston, a scene took place that would remain permanently burned into the dark archive of football history. A blonde American nurse in a white uniform walked directly onto the green pitch, took Diego Maradona by the hand, and walked him slowly off the field toward the stadium's medical facility for a routine post-match drug test. At the time, it looked like a harmless, standard procedure. But within 48 hours, an absolute economic and emotional earthquake shattered the World Cup. FIFA announced that Diego Maradona had tested positive for 5 separate variants of ephedrine, a powerful, banned stimulant that mimics adrenaline, dramatically accelerates fat loss, increases oxygen intake, and enhances physical reaction times. The greatest player of his generation had been caught red-handed using chemical assistance to fuel his miraculous physical redemption. If you are captivated by these deep, unfiltered looks into the dark scandals and incredible historical turning points that have shaped global football, please take a quick second right now to hit that like button. We put intense historical research into these scripts to give you the raw, uncompromised truth behind the sport. Make sure you are subscribed to the Football Archive so you never miss a single episode, and drop a comment below letting me know your honest thoughts. Do you think Maradona's legacy is permanently stained by his cheating, or does his genius transcend the rules? Let us get a massive debate going down in the comments section. Now let us look at the devastating fallout of that positive test. The backlash was immediate and completely catastrophic. Diego Maradona was instantly expelled from the tournament in absolute disgrace, and without their emotional and tactical anchor, the Argentine squad completely collapsed psychologically, getting knocked out of the World Cup just days later. Maradona furiously claimed that FIFA had betrayed him, pointing the finger at his personal trainer, who had allegedly purchased an over-the-counter American energy drink called Ripped Fuel, not realizing that the American formula contained the banned chemical ephedrine, unlike the legal version available in Argentina. But the governing bodies of world football showed absolutely zero mercy. Maradona was handed a brutal 15-month suspension from all professional football, an economic and sporting death sentence that effectively ended his international career on the absolute worst note imaginable. The image of the blonde nurse walking a smiling, unsuspecting Maradona off the pitch remains the definitive symbol of a fallen god, proving that when the pressure to maintain an impossible standard of greatness collides with the physical limitations of an aging body, even the most legendary figures in human history can succumb to the dark temptation of chemical deception. And as the football world slowly recovered from the shock of Maradona's tragic downfall, it would soon realize that cheating could also manifest as a split-second act of blatant, shameless physical theft on the biggest stage of European football, an event that left an entire nation weeping for justice. November 2009. The Stade de France in Paris was hosting a high-stakes, nerve-shredding World Cup playoff match between France and the Republic of Ireland. The prize at the end of the tunnel was an absolute ticket to the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. The Irish team, massive underdogs playing away from home, had put on a legendary, heroic performance, leading 1-0 through a goal from Robbie Keane and completely suffocating the French star-studded lineup. The match had pushed past the exhausting 90-minute mark and moved into a tense, dramatic period of extra time. The French fans were in absolute silence, watching their national team freeze on the biggest night of the year, facing a catastrophic sporting failure. Then, in the 103rd minute of the game, a long, desperate free kick from Florent Malouda sailed over the entire Irish defensive line and headed toward the back post. The ball was moving far too fast, bouncing dangerously out of bounds for what should have been a standard goal kick. But what happened next in a fraction of a second would completely shatter the heart of an entire nation and trigger a massive international sporting scandal. Thierry Henry, the legendary captain of France, one of the most elegant, respected, and highly decorated strikers in the entire history of modern football, sprinted toward the ball. Realizing that he could not reach it cleanly with his head or his feet before it crossed the line, Henry executed a blatant, calculated act of absolute physical theft. He stuck his left hand out, intentionally slapping the ball down twice to stop it from going out of bounds and to perfectly cushion it onto his right foot. With the ball now perfectly under control due to the illegal handball, Henry quickly flicked a short pass across the face of a goal, allowing William Gallas to easily head the ball into the back of the net. The entire stadium erupted, the French players sprinted away celebrating, and the Swedish referee Martin Hansen, whose vision had been completely blocked by a crowd of players in the box, pointed decisively to the center circle, signaling a valid goal. The Irish defenders went into absolute madness surrounding the referee, screaming in desperation and pleading with the linesman to review the play. Robbie Keane was down on his knees, holding his head, in complete disbelief. But there was no VAR back in 2009. The referee could not check a television screen, and the linesman refused to overrule the call. The match ended in a 1-1 draw, and France qualified for the World Cup on the absolute backbone of a blatant cheat. As the television replays broadcasted the match across the globe, the slow-motion footage exposed the fraud to millions of living rooms. It was undeniable. Thierry Henry had literally played basketball inside the penalty box to steal a World Cup qualification. The international backlash was instant, violent, and completely unprecedented. The government of Ireland officially petitioned FIFA for a historic replay of the match due to the blatant nature of the fraud, a request that was flatly rejected by the governing body. Thierry Henry's pristine, world-class reputation was completely dismantled overnight by the global sports media. He went from being a global icon of class and footballing elegance to being labeled a dishonest cheat on every single front page in Europe. Henry himself sat down on the pitch right next to the Irish defender Richard Dunne after the final whistle, admitting directly to him that he had handled the ball, but stating that he was not the referee. Years later, an underground investigation revealed that to avoid a massive legal battle and to silence the furious Irish Football Association, FIFA had secretly paid Ireland a massive, multi-million-dollar cash settlement disguised as a loan to build a stadium, effectively paying hush money to bury the scandal. The hand of Thierry Henry remains a definitive, chilling testament to how even the most legendary, universally respected figures in sports history can completely abandon their moral compass in a single second of absolute desperation, trading their lifetime honor for a stolen ticket to the world stage. And while Henry used his hand to cheat an opponent out of a victory, our next entry features an act of deception so bizarre and so absurd that it completely fooled a veteran Premier League manager into signing a player who was nothing more than a ghost. November 1996. The English Premier League was rapidly transforming into the wealthiest, most competitive football division on the planet. Managers were under immense economic pressure to uncover hidden talent across the globe, often relying on telephone recommendations and agent tips to secure depth for their squads. This brings us to Graham Souness, the legendary, hard-nosed manager of Southampton, who received a high-profile phone call that looked like an absolute gift from the heavens. The man on the other end of the line claimed to be none other than George Weah, the legendary AC Milan striker, multi-time African Footballer of the Year, and the undisputed winner of the 1995 Ballon d'Or. This fake Weah told Souness that he had a highly talented cousin named Ali Dia, an international forward who had played alongside him at Paris Saint-Germain and had represented the national team of Senegal. The voice on the phone claimed that Dia was a phenomenal athlete looking for a breakthrough opportunity in England. Souness, completely blinded by the prestige of the endorsement and desperate for a striker due to a massive injury crisis at the club, did not bother to verify the call or check any official registration records. He instantly offered Ali Dia a 1-month trial contract without ever seeing him play a single minute of competitive football. Dia arrived at the Southampton training ground looking the part of an athlete, but the moment he joined the first team practice session, the senior players were completely baffled. Matthew Le Tissier, the legendary icon of Southampton, later recalled that Dia looked like a running deer on ice, completely lacking basic spatial awareness, technical ball control, or any understanding of professional tactical positioning. He looked completely out of his depth. Souness, however, convinced himself that the player was just adjusting to the freezing English weather. A scheduled reserve match designed to test Dia's abilities was completely cancelled due to a massive rainstorm that flooded the pitch. Instead of waiting for another trial window, Souness made an absolute gamble that would go down as the most embarrassing managerial mistake in English football history. On November 23, 1996, Southampton faced Leeds United in a crucial Premier League fixture. Ali Dia was named on the substitute bench, wearing the number 33 shirt. In the 32nd minute of the match, Matthew Le Tissier suffered a sudden thigh injury and had to be substituted off the pitch. Souness turned to his bench, pointed at Ali Dia, and ordered him into the game. What followed over the next 53 minutes was an absolute comedy of errors, a live performance of sports fraud broadcasted to thousands of fans. Dia ran across the pitch like a ghost, completely lost in the tactical machinery of the Premier League. He would sprint toward positions where the ball used to be, actively run away from his own midfielders, and at one point managed to unleash a bizarre, weak shot that completely missed the entire stadium structure. It was blindingly obvious to every single fan in attendance that this man was not a professional footballer. He was a complete random imposter who had managed to smooth-talk his way onto a Premier League pitch. Souness, realizing the absolute disaster he had created, swallowed his pride and substituted Dia back off the pitch in the 85th minute of the game. The very next morning, Ali Dia did not show up for his scheduled medical treatment. He had completely packed his bags, checked out of his hotel room, and disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind an absolute mountain of unpaid bills and a deeply humiliated club. Subsequent investigations revealed that the phone call Souness received had been completely orchestrated by Ali Dia's university roommate, who had put on a deep voice to pretend to be George Weah. Dia had never played for Senegal, had never been near the Paris Saint-Germain squad, and was actually a struggling amateur player who had been rejected by lower division clubs in France and Germany. The legendary fraud of Ali Dia remains a hilarious yet chilling warning of how a lack of basic administrative verification and absolute desperation can allow a clever con man to hijack the biggest sporting stage in the world. And while Ali Dia used an amateur phone prank to cheat his way into the English elite, our next entry brings us back to a darker, institutionalized form of deception that took over the geopolitics of the sport, where athletes were treated like laboratory experiments. To fully comprehend how far the dark tentacles of sporting deception can reach, you have to leave behind the isolated stories of clever con men and look into a dark historical chapter where cheating was sponsored, managed, and executed by entire state governments. During the height of the Cold War and stretching well into the late 20th century, the football pitches of Eastern Europe and the Soviet bloc became ideological battlefields. Dictatorial regimes looked at the beautiful game not as a source of entertainment, but as a massive propaganda weapon to prove the genetic and political superiority of the communist system to the Western world. To achieve absolute athletic dominance on the global stage, these regimes implemented massive, highly secretive programs of systematic, state-sponsored doping that turned professional footballers into literal laboratory test subjects. This was an industrialized, cold-blooded operation where players were injected with experimental anabolic steroids, heavy testosterone cocktails, and dangerous blood-boosting hormones on a weekly basis, completely bypassing every medical and ethical code in existence. At the absolute center of this dark sports operation stood clubs closely tied to the state military complex and secret police forces, such as Dynamo Berlin in East Germany, Stoa Bucharest in Romania, and various Red Army clubs across the Soviet Union. Young players arriving at these high-profile facilities were forced into strict, isolated training regimes where they were handed mysterious pills and subjected to mandatory medical injections by team doctors who claimed they were merely delivering advanced vitamins and legal nutritional supplements to aid recovery. In reality, these athletes were being heavily loaded with performance-enhancing substances designed to artificially increase their physical lung capacity, accelerate muscle recovery, and allow them to execute brutal high-pressing tactics for a full 90 minutes without experiencing physical exhaustion. The deception was executed with absolute military precision. State scientists meticulously tracked the detection windows of the chemicals, ensuring that the players stopped taking the drugs right before international fixtures to guarantee they would pass the primitive anti-doping urine tests administered by FIFA and UEFA at the time. The results on the pitch were immediate and completely terrifying. Teams from the Eastern Bloc suddenly displayed a level of freakish physical aggression, unnatural speed, and endless stamina that completely overwhelmed the traditional giants of Western Europe. They won European trophies, dominated international tournaments, and left opposing managers completely baffled by their impossible physical output. But the true cost of this systematic cheating was paid by the players themselves long after they hung up their boots. Because they were fed massive amounts of unverified hormones without their informed consent, an entire generation of Eastern European footballers suffered catastrophic health crises in their later years. We are talking about severe heart failures, permanent liver destruction, psychological disorders, and premature deaths that directly traced back to the chemical experiments forced upon them by their own clubs. When the Berlin Wall finally collapsed and the secret archives of the Stasi and other Eastern European intelligence services were cracked open by international investigators, the full horror of the state-sponsored network was exposed to the public. It was a massive, documented system of institutionalized fraud that completely hijacked the integrity of European football for decades. The laboratory champions of the Iron Curtain remain a deeply tragic and chilling warning in the archive of sports corruption, proving that when the toxic forces of geopolitical propaganda and absolute political power take control of the sport, the white lines of the pitch are completely erased, replaced by a dark landscape where human beings are sacrificed for the sake of a fraudulent victory. And as the sport evolved out of the Cold War era and entered the modern globalized market, the methods of state-level cheating shifted from the medical laboratory to the administrative office, leading to a massive wave of document fraud that nearly altered the path to the World Cup, which we will examine next. As football entered a highly globalized era, the methods of sporting fraud evolved far beyond medical laboratories and hidden razor blades. The new frontier of high-stakes deception moved directly into the administrative offices of national federations, turning identity and citizenship into tools for strategic manipulation. The ultimate manifestation of this modern bureaucratic fraud erupted right before the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar, triggering an explosive legal battle that threatened to completely redraw the lineup of the tournament. At the absolute center of this geopolitical sporting storm stood a highly talented, lightning-fast right-back named Byron Castillo. He had been a crucial defensive anchor for the Ecuadorian national team throughout their grueling, highly competitive South American qualifying campaign, helping them secure a magnificent fourth-place finish and a direct ticket to Qatar. But just as the Ecuadorian fans were celebrating their return to the world stage, a legal bomb was dropped by the Chilean Football Federation. They filed an official multi-page complaint to FIFA claiming that Ecuador had fielded an ineligible player in 8 separate qualifying matches. The accusation was completely staggering. Chile asserted that Byron Castillo was not Ecuadorian at all. They claimed he was a phantom athlete operating under a completely fraudulent identity, using a falsified birth certificate and a fake passport to hide his true origins. According to the evidence brought forward by investigative journalists and Chilean lawyers, Byron Castillo was actually born in Tumaco, a coastal city in Colombia, 3 years before his official Ecuadorian registration date. The documents revealed a massive web of administrative contradictions. The birth certificate Castillo used to obtain his Ecuadorian passport lacked any official registration numbers, contained completely inconsistent signatures, and matched the exact name and family lineage of a child born in Colombia in 1995. It looked like a systematic case of document forgery designed to bypass FIFA's strict eligibility rules, which state that a player cannot represent a national team unless they hold legal citizenship and a valid passport from that specific country. If the allegations were proven true, Ecuador faced a catastrophic sporting penalty. Under FIFA disciplinary codes, any match involving an ineligible player must be declared a technical forfeit, automatically awarding a 3-0 victory to the opposing team. If FIFA deducted the points Ecuador won while Castillo was on the pitch, they would completely plummet to the bottom of the South American standings, and Chile would miraculously climb into a qualification spot, stealing the World Cup ticket at the very last second. The entire football world watched in absolute suspense as the case climbed all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, in Switzerland right before the opening match of the World Cup. The legal verdict was a bizarre, highly controversial compromise that left everyone completely stunned. The court ruled that Byron Castillo's Ecuadorian passport was technically authentic because it had been issued by the official government of Ecuador, meaning he was legally eligible to play in the tournament. However, the judges explicitly confirmed that the information inside that passport was completely fraudulent. They concluded that Castillo had indeed been born in Colombia and had used falsified data regarding his birth date and birthplace to obtain his Ecuadorian papers. The court hit the Ecuadorian Football Federation with a massive financial penalty and a brutal 3-point deduction for the next World Cup qualifying cycle as a direct punishment for the administrative deception. Fearing further legal chaos and potential mid-tournament disqualification, the Ecuadorian manager made the agonizing decision to completely drop Byron Castillo from the final World Cup squad. The phantom passport controversy exposed a deep, systemic vulnerability in the administrative machinery of global football, proving that in an industry driven by absolute commercial greed and national pride, even the sovereign documents that define a human being's identity can be weaponized in a calculated act of institutional cheating. And while this administrative fraud played out in courts of law, our next entry brings us back onto the pitch to analyze a more common, psychological form of deception that defined the pre-technology era, the art of the perfect dive. As football entered a highly globalized era, the methods of sporting fraud evolved far beyond medical laboratories and hidden razor blades. The new frontier of high-stakes deception moved directly into the administrative offices of national federations, turning identity and citizenship into tools for strategic manipulation. The ultimate manifestation of this modern bureaucratic fraud erupted right before the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar, triggering an explosive legal battle that threatened to completely redraw the lineup of the tournament. At the absolute center of this geopolitical sporting storm stood a highly talented, lightning-fast right-back named Byron Castillo. He had been a crucial defensive anchor for the Ecuadorian national team throughout their grueling, highly competitive South American qualifying campaign, helping them secure a magnificent fourth-place finish and a direct ticket to Qatar. But just as the Ecuadorian fans were celebrating their return to the world stage, a legal bomb was dropped by the Chilean Football Federation. They filed an official multi-page complaint to FIFA claiming that Ecuador had fielded an ineligible player in 8 separate qualifying matches. The accusation was completely staggering. Chile asserted that Byron Castillo was not Ecuadorian at all. They claimed he was a phantom athlete operating under a completely fraudulent identity, using a falsified birth certificate and a fake passport to hide his true origins. According to the evidence brought forward by investigative journalists and Chilean lawyers, Byron Castillo was actually born in Tumaco, a coastal city in Colombia, 3 years before his official Ecuadorian registration date. The documents revealed a massive web of administrative contradictions. The birth certificate Castillo used to obtain his Ecuadorian passport lacked any official registration numbers, contained completely inconsistent signatures, and matched the exact name and family lineage of a child born in Colombia in 1995. It looked like a systematic case of document forgery designed to bypass FIFA's strict eligibility rules, which state that a player cannot represent a national team unless they hold legal citizenship and a valid passport from that specific country. If the allegations were proven true, Ecuador faced a catastrophic sporting penalty. Under FIFA disciplinary codes, any match involving an ineligible player must be declared a technical forfeit, automatically awarding a 3-0 victory to the opposing team. If FIFA deducted the points Ecuador won while Castillo was on the pitch, they would completely plummet to the bottom of the South American standings, and Chile would miraculously climb into a qualification spot, stealing the World Cup ticket at the very last second. The entire football world watched in absolute suspense as the case climbed all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, in Switzerland right before the opening match of the World Cup. The legal verdict was a bizarre, highly controversial compromise that left everyone completely stunned. The court ruled that Byron Castillo's Ecuadorian passport was technically authentic because it had been issued by the official government of Ecuador, meaning he was legally eligible to play in the tournament. However, the judges explicitly confirmed that the information inside that passport was completely fraudulent. They concluded that Castillo had indeed been born in Colombia and had used falsified data regarding his birth date and birthplace to obtain his Ecuadorian papers. The court hit the Ecuadorian Football Federation with a massive financial penalty and a brutal 3-point deduction for the next World Cup qualifying cycle as a direct punishment for the administrative deception. Fearing further legal chaos and potential mid-tournament disqualification, the Ecuadorian manager made the agonizing decision to completely drop Byron Castillo from the final World Cup squad. The phantom passport controversy exposed a deep, systemic vulnerability in the administrative machinery of global football, proving that in an industry driven by absolute commercial greed and national pride, even the sovereign documents that define a human being's identity can be weaponized in a calculated act of institutional cheating. And while this administrative fraud played out in courts of law, our next entry brings us back onto the pitch to analyze a more common, psychological form of deception that defined the pre-technology era, the art of the perfect dive. We have come to the end of a dark, jaw-dropping journey through the hidden archives of football corruption, and the final verdict is completely undeniable. The battle between the strict rules of fair play and the absolute desperation to win is not a collection of isolated, historical mistakes. It is an ongoing, evolving war for the very soul of the beautiful game. As we stand in the year 2026, watching elite athletes compete under the bright lights of multi-billion-dollar international stadiums, we realize that while the methods of deception have changed, the fundamental human vulnerability remains exactly the same. The sport has transitioned from a wild landscape where an individual goalkeeper could stage a bloody farce with a razor blade or an amateur prankster could talk his way onto a Premier League pitch into a hyper-regulated, high-tech industry. Today, we have the cold, uncompromised lens of the video assistant referee, advanced forensic data tracking, and state-of-the-art laboratory testing designed to eliminate fraud entirely. Yet, as the technology gets smarter, the cheaters simply adapt, moving into the invisible shadows of digital betting rings, spot-fixing syndicates, and sophisticated administrative document forgery. If you have made it this far with us through this deep exploration of sports deception, I want to say a massive thank you for watching. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss another hard-hitting, deep-dive documentary from the team here at the Football Archive. Now, I want to hear directly from your side of the screen. Drop your final thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think the introduction of modern technology like VAR has successfully cleaned up the beautiful game? Or do you believe that the financial pressure of modern football means that someone, somewhere, will always find a brand new, highly sophisticated way to cheat the system? Let us get an absolute debate going down in the comments. Share your opinions and let us talk football. Looking back at the incredible stories of Diego Maradona's tragic downfall, Thierry Henry's split-second theft, or the ultimate con of Carlos Kaiser, we are reminded of why this sport captivates the human race so deeply. It is because football is a raw reflection of human nature itself, a beautiful, unpredictable theater filled with moments of absolute genius, but also stained by absolute desperation, greed, and calculated fraud. The 10 stories we examine today prove once and for all that a trophy won through a lie carries a permanent curse in the history books. True legacy cannot be manufactured in a laboratory, forged on a phantom passport, or purchased through an underground syndicate. The archive of these legendary scandals remains open as a permanent warning to the next generation of football fans. The rules of the game can be broken in a moment of madness, but the cold eyes of history will always catch you in the end.